Hello, Thomas. This is Mike, and this is the first to last at the Nerdom, and this is our special smaller show, and we're going to be covering a smaller slice of the Star Trek universe in the form of the Next Generation with Patrick Stewart. It started in the '80s and stopped in the mid '90s. And with that being said, that's what's on our plate for today. We're going to be covering episodes Encounter at Farpoint Station and episode 3, The Naked Now. And with that, so is it true, Thomas, that you've not actually seen any of the Next Generation episodes?
Somewhat. Basically, what happened was, it came out while I was in high school, the series, and at that time, I was, as a young lad, I was very enamored with the original Star Trek series. So I was somewhat excited about the Next Generation, although teenagers being teenagers, they kind of rebel, and me being the nerd, I rebelled the nerdy way. I was getting more into horror movies, horror novels, and the edgier Vertigo comic books. I was a badass nerd. So when Next Generation came around, I was looking for maybe an edgy commander of the Enterprise, someone much like Shatner, sort of kind of fast and loose kind of guy. And I watched Encounter at Farpoint Station is the name of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this isn't for me. I watched it and I was like, who is this Picard guy? I don't like him. I don't like Wesley Crusher. I don't like any of these characters. So I argued with my fellow nerds in high school, and they totally loved the series and tried to convince me to watch it. And I was like, nah, this isn't my bag. So I dipped out. And yeah, and I did watch one other episode or two. There was I think a two-parter with Spock, and I was excited that Spock was coming back. Leonard Nimoy was going to do some an episode, so I watched those two. So outside those, I have never seen any of the other episodes. I have not seen any of the Next Generation movies either, so that may be something we can dip into after we cover the series. But yeah, I thought it might be a fun kind of thing to go back to a few decades old series and get my my new take on this series. In complete disclosure, I'm aware of most of the characters on the series. You couldn't be alive during this time without being familiar with some of these people like Worf and Data and LaForge, especially being a nerd and being a part of nerd culture. You had to know at least the characters, and I know about the holodeck and Q. Actually, here's how much little I knew. I kind of mixed up Q and Data together. I thought maybe they were Data had transformed into Q or something.
Okay.
To that nature. I didn't put much thought into the Next Generation because that wasn't my thing, and I haven't seen the other iterations of it. I haven't seen Deep Space Nine or Enterprise or any of those. I haven't seen Discovery either of the newer stuff. But yeah. So this was my rewatch of the first two-parter episode and my first watch of episode 3.
Very cool. Yeah. It is iconic.
And what's to lead it back to you, what's your history? You are the veteran with Star Trek, am I not right?
Yes. Yeah. So my dad and I watched just about every single episode of The Next Generation, not live as they aired at the time, but over time. Like this was in syndication for years. There was many a Saturday night or Friday night, something like that, maybe a weeknight, but usually I remember more of the weekend, and about 11 o'clock after the evening news, and then after the Tonight Show or whatever. Actually, it was probably a little bit later than that, but the midnight showing, I guess, is what you would say. Then they would always be forever running reruns of this one, or as time went further, they would Deep Space Nine, and then later Voyager, that kind of thing. So yeah, this was one that my dad and I watched from beginning to end. Essentially, we saw just about every single episode, and we just fell in love with it. And it was a father-son bonding moment, and was also shared with my other siblings too, as they grew up. And they grew up there. They were younger, so they liked. My sister loves Voyager. I'm not as enamored about Voyager as she is, but that's about the time when I was her age, when kind of the dynamic. So I get it. Deep Space Nine was a little bit too dark for me back then, so I would skip out on it, and I caught up with it years later. But yeah, pretty much have seen beginning to end the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and then most of season 1 of Discovery. And at that point, I kind of turned the TV off and I stopped following Trek from the most recent modern day ones. And I think there's 2. There's Picard that's out, and there's the Star Trek Discovery. We won't be getting into that, but those are the 2 most common ones that are out there right now. And having said that, kind of going back to this was the foundational being laid. This is the season. This is the very first, their first attempt at it, to kind of bring it back into the modern stream. Because at this point, this was like the mid '80s or late '80s. I think '87 or something like that. That when it came out proper, and it was 20 years after the original series. So Star Trek had, up to this point, had been hanging on by the original series crew, and it was always in the minds of the popular conscious, never went too far away. And they did some really cool stuff, I think, in the 70s with the NASA and the Enterprise, and some kind of cool things. And they Star Trekkers or Trekkies had to live off of the mana of the original series, and a lot of Comic Cons, or back in that era, the Star Trek cons or conventions that were very proto.
Yeah.
Not as big today as they are now. It was just them, and they hit the road and kept everything alive.
Yeah, and you did have they did bring back the original, the Star Trek in the motion pictures was a bit of a flop, but then you had Star Trek
That's
2,
true.
The Wrath of
Forgot about that.
Khan, which kind of brought it back into the forefront of everybody. And since you were dealing with a kind of a aging crew there, as those films were going, I'm sure they wanted to revitalize with the new crew and to carry on into the future. So I'm sure that's where the Next Generation kind of had its genesis. And then one other memory that I just remembered was I think right after the premiere of the 2-parter film, my friends and I had went camping, and I vividly remember us having completed camping and were starving, and went to on our way back, we stopped at Pizza Hut to dine in, because back in those days you could dine in at a pizza. It was a big deal. That was a big deal with your red Pizza Hut cup. We sat there and argued about the merits of the Next Generation. But nice. I thought I'd just kind of leave that there. And also, one other thing is, I think the showrunner for Battlestar Galactica, the reboot from the 2000s, I think he didn't start off on the series, but I think later on in Next Generation he becomes like one of the big writers in that. So that was one of the reasons I kind of wanted to go back and revisit, because I'm a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. So but yeah, and I guess
he came on later on, like season 2 or 3, something like that. I know you're talking about. He famously, and then he also had a large part of the creative force behind Deep Space Nine, which was also fantastic. That was a few years before he went on to do Battle. I can't think of his name, but I know you're talking about.
I think it's Ronald A. Moore.
That's right. That's right. And with that, the only other memory part that I would go and spend the summers with my grandparents, and my uncle, he had moved out a long time ago. when I was there, I remember he had this is the Paramount Home Pictures. He actually ordered and paid for most of the series on VHS tape. So those were stored at my grandma's house. So when I would go there, there was just this big library of all these, any episode you wanted to play on VHS tape. That as long as I took it away and took care of it as a kid, I was allowed to watch just about whichever one I wanted. And I do have fond memories of going back and rewatching a lot of these before Netflix and the like, and just enjoying that was a rare treat as a kid, because otherwise you would have had to wait for TV, and it wasn't all that long. And I also remember watching with my grandpa, my great on my mom's side. He would let me come out really late at night when either the original series or one of them was on, really late, and I would kind of sneak behind his chair, and he knew I was out there, and he would say, "Hey, go ahead, lay on the couch, and you can watch it." He's kind of a Tesser and hard scrabble kind of tough love kind of guy, but he would be like, "Oh, you can stay up for a little bit longer and watch this," and it was just true back then. But anyway, getting into that, so revisiting this years later, I'll let you take it away and kind of set up the storyline and what your thoughts kind of going into it were and out of it.
Yeah. So Encounter at Farpoint, written by Gene Roddenberry, DC Fontana. Those are names are recognized from the original series. So I guess you're kind of handing off the baton to the newer generation. But yeah, it was a enjoyable episode. You had the crew's not quite together yet. They're having to go to Farpoint to bring everybody together, and on their way to that, they encounter this being called Q, which challenges them by saying that humanity's a savage and isn't redeemable, and that they were to be executed. But Picard says that he could prove that humans have changed, that humanity has learned to be humane, and that they have 20. And he convinces Q that he has 24 hours to prove that the humans are worth saving.
This is you could see the early seams, so to speak, between the crew, like where the chemistry isn't quite there. But there was I guess this concept will come up more as we go forward, but not to foreshadow anything, but it's not too far afield to say some of these actors were very wooden. And
definitely. Yeah, if I remember right, that the original series wasn't like a major network; it was on a cable network, or I think it went out
CBS,
in syndication, and so whatever.
Desilu,
I think it was done by
Desilu owned it, and was there's just some backstory there, but that's germane for another episode.
Right.
But
right. but yeah, so yeah, I don't think they were pulling in high caliber actors from the market. I'm sure Patrick Stewart was. I don't know him from his history as far as an actor, but yeah, he seemed to have some gravitas, as they say, whereas the other actors, yes, were a little bit wet behind the ears, so to speak. But yeah, the acting, of course, wasn't stellar, and the obviously special effects are 80s special effects, so TV 80s special effects. But that being said, they weren't bad. None of it pulled me out of character, like when they froze Yar. Q froze Yar. That looked pretty realistic. It didn't throw me off. I wasn't giggling at that. So, and then to jump ahead a little bit into the next episode, I noticed when they were checking the crew that had died, all of those frozen bodies that were on the ship in the next episode were the Naked Now. They used kind of the same effect that they used on Yar, and still it looked good. I guess they're kind of recycling what they had for the second episode. But to jump back to the first episode, yeah, it was more or less a introduction to the crew episode. But that being said, since you couldn't really have a effects show, it really made the writers write a story that you could follow, and that's what kind of gripped me through the whole thing. It does have an interesting mystery to it. You don't know quite what's going on the Farpoint. You know that there's sort of this mysterious being that's that the one of the officers kind of senses by her sensory powers, but you don't know what's really going on with that character. You know it's in pain, but you don't know really what's going on. You also have the whole Q thing in the background as well. It's kind of a multi-layered episode, which today's series you'd only have that would one of the stories be focused on in an episode or two or three, them trying to get as many episodes out of a story as possible, and then the Q thing would be a whole nother few episodes. But it's all compacted into one episode or a two-part episode that really works well. And as to touch upon my original distaste for Picard, I really enjoy him now. Now that I'm older, I get the nuanced performance and character that is Picard. He's obviously very different from Shatner's Kirk, which I wanted another Kirk 2.0, but which I didn't get. But I now that I've had some distance in time, I appreciate who Picard is as a character.
Yeah,
and I still don't like Wesley Crusher. He's still
I don't know that there ever was a high watermark for that particular character in Will Wheaton. I will be just to say the positive, like I do enjoy some of his narrative work from time to time, because sometimes it can be grating or annoying, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, touching point on Patrick Stewart, this is my first time seeing him in anything. His acting was solid all the way through. I don't think he ever had a bad acting moment. There's a little I think he does a very good job throughout the series for the most part. But a lot of these other characters, I think maybe Brent Spiner, he did pretty well too. But all these characters this is their first brush, and they have to grow. I think that's very true with Gates McFadden, with Dr. Crusher, and some of them definitely true for Commander Riker, who would become later on very famous with the beard later on, foreshadowing a little bit. But yeah, I agree with you. The special effects will hold up as well too.
And to touch on Riker, man, this guy and his smiles. There's like a 2 or 3 different points in the episode where he just kind of looks and smiles, and he's got the creepiest smile I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, later on he parlays that and gets a handle on it, and it kind of goes more into I won't say more than that, but it does become a little bit better as time goes on. But this is their first brush with everything. Patrick Stewart was there, but it was just interesting too. I think Whoopi Goldberg, I want to say, I don't think she was in. I don't think she was in until later. No, she was in later. Memory is bad, but anyway, yeah, this worked. The acting was wooden. Suit characters finding their stride, and going from that. So did you enjoy it overall before we bridge into the Naked Now?
Yeah, our original plan was just to cover Encounter Farpoint in this episode, but I was enjoying myself so much that I did watch the third episode because yeah, I was enjoying myself, and the whole dated aspect of it, that whole 80s sort of TV show I kind of missed that, and it was fun to watch that. There's sort of a charm to that era of television, and like I said, it's more story based, very heavily story based. And the bad thing about that era of television is that if you didn't have a good writer, if you didn't have a good plot, if you didn't have good characters, you didn't have nothing. You really didn't have anything to fall back on.
You don't have
no
people
fast-paced action.
you don't have people 35-ish years later, 30 plus years later talking about it. That's very true, for sure. And the quality of the episodes, I think, too, even though there's a spectrum here, as there is with all things, as far as like how good it is. A lot of the criticism of season one is, well, I mean, it's the first thing. It's the first time they're doing everything. But the way that they cut the episodes were a little bit different, apart from how they were doing it before with like typical 80s. You're right. There is a feel of the 80s to it a little bit. But there is a structure that is uniquely its own, and it quickly becomes apparent. There's a style that they like to pursue, and this is true for all. Like, there's a style for the original series, that the way that they were doing that, and the same thing for DS9. They really differentiated the different versions. Probably true up until about Voyager, but that's a discussion for another day, as far as like what they were trying to go back for. But it is a strong contrast too between, and I think Patrick Stewart and with Q, they knew what they were doing enough to, one, it holds up today for the most part, I think, but just having this big, massive, huge story Q and this thing and humanity and putting it all out there as the first introductory episode, it works, and I think it works because of John D. Lance and as Q and Patrick Stewart. Credit to them for they were on their game throughout the entire. Even as silly and as kind of bonkers as this Q character is, like where he's this 22nd century whatever judge, jury, and executioner, and all these guys are like dystopian apocalyptic world kind of thing, whatever, all the way to him popping up and then providing a little bit of comic relief. That is, I think that was interesting, and it was maybe awkward a little bit, but I think that it quickly became a hallmark of the show, and you kind of get these little very tastefully done jokes, very tastefully done comedy, to kind of break up the tension a little bit. That they knew how to do it then, for sure, as opposed to other things. But for the most part, so you enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
and then to go on to the Naked Now, this one wasn't quite up to par with the first two-parter. This one was a fun little episode, funning the keyword. The crew finds a ship that all the members on it are dead. Some blown out of the ship, out of airlock, and some of them have been frozen to death. And it seems to be self-inflicted for the whole thing. And from I guess there's a disease or some type of virus that gets transmitted through physical contact. And one of the members, the Geordie, actually ends up touching one of the dead crew members, and he's the first to get infected, and the virus makes the person seem to be intoxicated. And so it's a fun episode where everybody's kind of playing against type. I think this episode might have worked better later on in the series. It's not the best episode for your third episode because you're still getting used to the characters, so that when they do start acting against type, you're not really sure of who they are anyway. So Yar, you're not sure. She seems to be kind of this hardened person that becomes very sexualized after being intoxicated. But that would probably have been more driven home and worked better as a later episode, I think, once you kind of got used to the characters and knew who they were. But yes, with them being episodic series, maybe their take was that people could start the series at any time, so this might be their first episode anyway, so it really didn't matter. But I think with us binge watching series now, and we see them as a series, as episode after episode, you're going to watch them chronologically anyway. This probably would have worked better as a later episode, and since it's not the strongest episode in the world, that may have been a better call as well. Since you were very strong out of the gate with the first two-parter that had very strong writing and had such great acting and such a good storyline, that this one seemed kind of silly and kind of okay. And again, it would have been more enjoyable, I think, later on once you got used to the characters and your favorite character in mind, and seeing them act silly would have been kind of fun later on.
You're right about that. This is the very first time that they're leaning into that episodic, the formula that becomes the Next Generation in Star Trek. That was kind of repeated, but made in its own image for the Next Generation. And you'll see that. I agree completely. There's, again, same comment I would make as far as like some of the actors, like if they make a small part, they're still very wooden. They're still kind of finding their stride. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, again, same thing. Patrick Stewart, he's on point. He's pretty much on point every single episode. And that's not just because of whatever, but because like I'm of all the people that were on the show at this point, I believe that he was probably the most veteran actor as far as and his background is I believe theater. He has some theater in there. And a little of a kind of a little tie-in. Well, we can shoot that tie-in some other time. I won't get into that because we're focusing on just this one thing. But in any case, Patrick Stewart is. I used to remember him. He was just always old and bald, but I think he was in his 40s when he did this. Or late 50s.
Yeah. So,
but I just always remember looking at him, and whether it was like back then or even now today, I was just like he's aged, but he's always kind of looked like the stock old man, I guess, bald old man, with gravitas.
Yeah. And now that we're getting upwards in age, it doesn't seem all that bad back when we were young. that was like, ancient.
Oh my God, that's so ancient. Yeah, man. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just always remember looking at him and being like, how old is that dude? Like, without Ray or anything like that indicator, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, I think I heard that they were gonna maybe have him wear a toupee in the series to start with or something.
That's funny.
And there's sort of like some test footage of him. I don't remember where I saw that, but I think there's some test footage out there with a rug on his head. But yeah, funny. To get back to Picard in this episode, I think their biggest missed opportunity is really playing into, because he's like you said, he's a great actor. He's very strong in these two episodes that you've seen. He's the main character you wanted to see get goofy in this series, which he kind of does a little bit with Beverly Crusher, but he doesn't go full on goofy, and that's their missed opportunity in this episode. I think they really should have played into it and got him to be a little bit more goofy, which maybe they didn't want to do because he's sort of that stern central person in the series. But again, if it was a later episode, once you've established him as this solid leader, that him being goofy in this episode would have been really, really fun.
Yeah, no, that's true. And they do paint the backstory here with the different characters' interactions, and that kind of they take the opportunity to really build the character backstories, and they're an integral part of this as it goes forward, whether it's Dr. Crusher and Will and Wesley, or it's their interactions, where they came from, kind of calling it is all rooted for a purpose. So and not only that, but you're also seeing the story of the crew build before your eyes. There's a particular it becomes very pivotal, not pivotal for anything important really per se, but there is the background story there with the Data and Yar. I won't give it away, whatever, but it probably wouldn't matter. But there's this, you can start to see the storyline kind of build as the episodicness rolls out.
Yeah, and one thing I did notice, well, with Yar and Data, that was kind of, I guess, a little risque for maybe an 80s TV series. And
definitely for Star
I noticed
Trek,
that
for sure, for like implied, like directly implied, sexuality or whatever, because it was always implied. There would be a smooch on the cheek with Kirk and whatever, but there was nothing more than that for the era anyway.
Yeah, and some of the background characters are kind of interesting to watch, like Encounter at Farpoint. There's this one character you see occasionally. It's physically it's a male character, and he's in a skirt outfit like most of the female characters are. And I was kind of surprised to see that, but they had that in there this so early on in Star Trek. They're trying to be inclusive and all that. But yeah, I did notice that, and I was kind of surprised by it. But it's a welcome kind of thing that I saw. But yeah, that's kind of furthering the whole Star Trek being, this one universe, kind of a universal sort of vibe to everything.
Yeah, they start to strike a pattern and a habit, and it's not too clear. Well, the broad brush strokes are very clear in Farpoint Station, how it ends, and how it goes on, with the interaction with Q there and humanity, and Picard being the avatar of humanity, if you will, or the defender. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting how that grows too, as compared to TOS. But having said that, I'm really looking forward to kind of pulling more of these out and doing this. But I'm happy that you want to revisit these and see as we go through almost in real time what your thoughts are. As they build the characters, and they all get better at what they do.
Yeah, and in kind of conclusion to wrap things up on this episode, but it's a good start. I'm looking forward to it. You've kind of tantalized me with some hints for future episodes, so I'm looking forward to those. And also, if you're first time seeing our show here, we have a podcast on this channel, the First to Last Nerdom. We cover all things nerd. We've had in the past a heavy influence on comic books. We've touched on horror movies. We've had a famous writer, Joe Lansdale, on one of our podcasts. Check that out. But yeah, if you like what you see here, you might find our podcast interesting to check out as well.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And please let us know whether you like this little short, or like, comment, and subscribe. We always looking for more feedback. More things that we should touch base on. We like to try to find new and interesting nerddom out there. Really anything out there, but we do have a weekly show, and we cover a lot more in depth, and some are longer than others, and it's been fun, and I look forward to Go ahead.
And feel free to watch these episodes along with us. I think on our next episode, I think we're going to do the next two episodes, maybe a third episode, depending on how much I watch. So, but at least get 3 episodes ahead of us, so that you're ready for our next episode. If you're watching for the first time, like I am, if you've seen these before, obviously you know these episodes, but maybe watch them again as a refresher. and I think they're all. I'm watching them on Paramount Plus. I went ahead and picked that up to watch it. But yeah, it has all things Star Trek on there.
Yeah. And I always have a offline copy of the Next Generation episode to episode, just because it's I always love to have it on hand. But it is out there, and it's great to watch and revisit and kind of see the more shakier parts of how they make the sausage, so to speak. Not that bad. It's actually pretty good and refreshing compared to some things nowadays. But anyway, it's good quality. I'm glad you found it, and we'll definitely be covering the next few episodes next week.
And like and subscribe, and to keep up with us, like and subscribe, and we look forward to you coming and watching our next episode.
Indeed. Thank you. See you next week.
See you.